How many times have you found yourself explaining why you did something only to feel smaller in the end? You defend your choices, justify your actions, and walk away wondering why you even bothered. And for what? To be understood, to avoid judgment. Somewhere on the others come, we're all on the way. We were trained that our decisions must come with a footnote and explanation, a read for approval. But let me ask you something. When did we start believing that our choices need to be defended? Who told us that our worth depends on whether others agree with us? The truth is, the habit of over-explaining isn't about clarity, it's about fear. Fear of rejection, fear of disappointing others, fear of being seen as different. But what if I told you that this habit isn't harmless, it's costing you more than you realize? You think explaining yourself makes things clear, but in reality, it does the opposite. Every time you justify your actions, you're handing over control. You're giving someone else the power to decide whether your choices are good enough. The more you explain, the less credible you appear. The more you justify, the more permission you seek. And here's the hard truth. People don't respect explanations, they respect conviction. Every justification is like handing over a piece of your power, trading gold for paper. The strongest voices in the room aren't the ones rattling off explanations. They're the ones who speak with certainty without apology. So ask yourself, are you making decisions or are you asking for permission? Because the moment you stop explaining, the moment you stand firm without seeking approval, that's the moment people start listening. Confidence isn't about convincing people to agree with you. It's about knowing where you stand even when no one else does. The strongest people don't explain, they act. The weakest talk themselves into circles. Look around leaders, innovators, people who change the game. They don't waste time defending their choices. They trust their vision and they move forward. That's the difference. So do you want to lead or do you want to be understood? Because those are two very different things. If you're chasing approval, you'll always be one step behind. But if you decide right now that your decisions don't need a stamp of approval, you'll step into a power most people never experience. You don't owe the world an explanation. You owe yourself the courage to stand by your choices unapologetically. You want to know the real secret? The most powerful people don't explain, they act. They let their results do the talking. You don't need to explain why you're starting that business, changing careers, setting boundaries, or walking away from things that no longer serve you. Just do it. If people don't understand now, they will later. And if they never do, that's their problem, not yours. The moment you stop explaining is the moment you start living on your terms. So here's your challenge, stop explaining. Start doing. Let your speak louder than your words. And remember, this self-trust is the real key to confidence. The second you decide that your choices are enough without explanation, you'll find a freedom you never knew existed. Now, are you ready to step into that power? Do you seek approval at the cost of your own power? Think about it. How often do you catch yourself explaining your choices as if you need permission to live the way you want? This habit comes from one thing, fear. The fear of judgment, the fear of rejection, the fear of being misunderstood. We explain ourselves because we don't want people to get the wrong idea. We try to make them see our side to soften their criticism, to prove that we're making the right decision. But let's be clear, when you feel the need to explain, you're admitting that your worth is determined by others, that their opinion carries more weight than your own, that if they don't agree, your choice somehow loses value. Now let me ask you this, what if you didn't explain? What if you just owned your choices without a single word of justification? What would happen? Would your world collapse? Would everything fall apart? Or would you finally feel making decisions for yourself without waiting for someone else's approval? The truth is, explaining isn't about clarity, it's about insecurity. And it's time to break free from it. You don't explain yourself because you want to. You explain because deep down you don't feel like your choices are enough on their own. That's the real damage. Over-explaining is a symptom of insecurity. It's an unconscious way of asking, do you think I'm right? Am I good enough? Do you accept me? Every time you explain yourself, you let others write your story. You hand over your confidence piece by piece, waiting for them to approve what should already belong to you. And here's the worst part, you don't even realize you're doing it. You think you're just being polite, just clearing up misunderstandings. But in reality, every unnecessary explanation chips away at your strength. You're enough. You don't need approval. You don't need to defend your choices like you're on trial. So ask yourself, who are you really trying to convince? Them or yourself? Because once you stop looking for outside validation, that's when you start building unshakable confidence. Let's talk about the lies you've been telling yourself. I have to explain myself, or they won't understand. I don't want them to think I'm rude. If I don't explain, they might judge me. Sound familiar? These are the beliefs that keep you trapped in the cycle of over-explaining. But let's be real, none of them are true. The truth is, self-worth isn't up for debate. It's not something you have to justify. You don't need permission to be who you are. You don't need validation to move forward. The strongest people in the world don't waste time explaining themselves. They know who they are. They trust their instincts. They act without waiting for approval. And guess what? People respect them for it. So here's the real question: what would happen if you stopped explaining and just moved forward? Would you lose anything worth keeping? Or would you finally gain the confidence to stand tall without asking the world to agree with you? There's power in silence. The strongest people rarely explain themselves because they don't have to. Their actions speak for them. Their confidence is loud enough. So here's your first step. The next time you feel the urge to explain, pause. Ask yourself, do I need their approval? Or do I already know my worth? When you hold back from explaining, you send a message. You tell the world, I trust myself. And when you do that consistently, people stop questioning you. They start believing in you because you believe in yourself. So make a decision today, stop over-explaining. Let people think what they want. You don't owe anyone an explanation for being yourself. And remember, confidence isn't built through words, it's built through action. So take action. Step forward. Own your choices. And watch how the world starts treating you differently. Explaining yourself is a silent killer of your potential. You may not realize it, but every unnecessary justification chips away at your power. It slows you down, weakens your presence, and makes you seem uncertain even when you're not. So why do we do it? Fear of judgment. Fear of disappointing people. Fear of stepping outside the lines and making someone uncomfortable. Somewhere along the way, we were trained to believe that if we don't explain ourselves, we're being rude, reckless, or inconsiderate. But here's the truth: every time you explain, you drain your energy. Every time you justify, you lower your credibility. The more you explain, the less confident you seem. And the less confident you seem, the less respect you command. Now let me ask you, what if you simply stopped? What would happen if you let your speak instead? Would your world fall apart, or would you finally step into the power you've been giving away? It's time for a reset. The habit of over-explaining has been stealing from you. Now it's time to take that power back. Every time you explain yourself unnecessarily, you're making a withdrawal from your most valuable resources, your time, your energy, and your influence. Think of your time and energy as a bank account. Every explanation is a transaction. Every justification is a payment. And most of the time you're handing out these payments for free, giving away what should be fueling your success. Over-explaining doesn't just waste minutes, it wastes momentum. You could be using that time to take action, to build something, to make progress. Instead, you're stuck in a loop, repeating yourself, trying to get people to see things your way. And let's be clear, people who demand explanations aren't looking for clarity. They're looking for control. When you keep justifying yourself, you're feeding that control. Cut it out. Stop giving away your energy and start commanding respect. Now here's a challenge, think back. How much of your life have you spent defending your choices instead of making them? And more importantly, how much longer are you willing to keep paying this price? Want to know why leaders don't justify themselves? Because they don't need to. Their actions speak louder than their words. Now think about the workplace. Imagine two employees, one who confidently states their decisions, another who explains every move like they need approval. Who do you think gets promoted? Who do you think earns more respect? The more you explain, the more uncertain you sound. The more uncertain you sound, the less trust you build. Any career, confidence is currency. If you can't own your decisions, why should anyone else trust them? And it's not just your career. Over-explaining damages personal relationships too. When you constantly justify your choices, you send a message, I don't trust myself. And when people sense that, they start questioning you more, pushing you further into the cycle of defending yourself. Would you follow a leader who second guesses everything they do? No, and neither will anyone else. So here's the question: do you want to be seen as someone who needs approval or someone who commands respect? The most powerful people say less. They don't waste time explaining, they act. They decide, they move. And they let the results do the talking. So here's your challenge: try going a full day without justifying yourself. No explanations, no over-explaining, just decisions, statements, and action. Watch how people respond. Watch how they start taking you more seriously. Because here's the truth: you don't need to explain. You need to act. You don't need to justify. You need to move forward. Every word you use to explain is a withdrawal from your power. Protect your reserves. Stop spending energy on people who don't deserve it. Stop giving away confidence that should belong to you. Stand firm. Speak with conviction. Let your actions prove your worth. And remember, true confidence isn't built by explaining. It's built by believing in yourself enough to know that you don't have to. Now, are you ready to take that first step? Because this is your turning point. What happens when you stop talking and just do? What shifts when you stop explaining and let your actions prove your worth? The truth is, power isn't loud. Power doesn't beg to be understood. The strongest leaders, the most influential people, and the ones who command real respect don't waste their breath trying to convince others. They speak with purpose. They act with certainty. Silence speaks louder than words. Power speaks louder than explanations. Think of the people you admire, those who carry an undeniable presence. They don't overshare. They don't explain themselves. They move with quiet confidence, and because they don't seek approval, approval seeks them. When you explain too much, you weaken your presence. You give people permission to doubt you. Every unnecessary justification lowers your authority, making you seem uncertain whether you are or not. But when you hold back, when you speak only when necessary, you shift the balance of power in your favor. People start leaning in, they start paying attention. So here's your challenge. What if instead of explaining, you just acted? What if you let your results do the talking? What if you trusted yourself enough to stay silent? Because those who control their words control the room. Most people believe that explaining themselves makes them look more credible. That more words equal more trust. That if they just explain their choices enough, people will respect them. But that's an illusion. The more you explain, the weaker you appear. Instead of building credibility, you dilute your value. Instead of proving yourself, you look uncertain. Look at the people who hold the most power, leaders, visionaries, decision makers. They don't over-explain. They don't try to win people over with endless justifications. They say what needs to be said, then they stop. Now compare that to someone who lacks confidence. They ramble. They explain their every move. They seek permission with every word. And what happens? They lose respect. When you explain too much, you train people to doubt you. You make them think there's something wrong with your decisions. You give them space to question your confidence. Don't just speak to be heard. Speak because you choose to. Think of your words as currency. The more you spend, the less valuable they become. But if you spend them wisely, if you speak with clarity, certainty, and restrain, every word carries weight. So ask yourself, are you controlling your words? Or are your words controlling you? Silence isn't just the absence of words, it's a strategy. It's a tool used by the most powerful people in the world. Why? Because people respect those who don't feel the need to fill every gap with words. The more you speak, the more predictable you become. The more predictable you become, the less powerful you seem. Silence is a sword. Use it to cut through the noise of others' opinions. Think about the last time you were in a conversation where someone was rambling on, explaining themselves over and over. Did they sound strong? Or did they sound desperate? Now think of someone who speaks with purpose, who chooses their words carefully, who lets their presence do most of the talking. That's the person people remember. That's the person people respect. When you stop over-explaining, you create space. You make people lean in. You force them to listen. And when you do speak, your words carry weight. So here's your question: what would happen if you started choosing silence over explanation? What if instead of defending yourself, you simply stood firm? What would change? Try and see. The final shift you need to make is to stop trying to prove yourself. Stop explaining. Stop seeking approval. And start trusting your own decisions. There's no confidence is allowed. It doesn't come from endless words. It comes from knowing who you are without needing the world to agree. Your silence is not weakness. It is the ultimate display of self-assurance. So here's how you take back control. Resist the urge to justify yourself. You don't owe anyone an explanation for living your life. Learn to pause. Not every question needs an immediate answer. Not every doubt needs to be addressed. Speak with purpose. When you do talk, make it matter. Say less, mean more. The next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, stop. Let your actions do the talking. Let your silence create the presence that words never could. Because at the end of the day, power isn't about proving, it's about being. And once you master that, you become unshakable. Power is a choice. And it starts with how you speak and how you don't speak. The habit of over-explaining isn't something you were born with. It was learned. Conditioned into you by a world that teaches people to seek approval, to fear judgment, to believe that their decisions are only valid if others agree with them. But here's the truth: nobody can give you confidence. You have to take it. The first step is breaking the mental habit of over-explaining. Every time you justify your choices, you hand over a little bit of your power. And the more you do it, the smaller you become. So what's the shift? Ownership. owning your decision without asking the world for permission, speaking with certainty even when others don't understand, trusting yourself enough to let silence do the talking. The less you explain, the more they listen. The less you justify, the more respect you command. Now here's your challenge. What if you stopped explaining and just trusted yourself? What if instead of proving you simply stood firm? What would change? Try it, because once you step into this mindset, you'll realize you never needed to explain yourself in the first place. If you want to stop explaining yourself, you need to recognize when and why you do it. Ask yourself, when do you instinctively start justifying? When someone questions your choices, when you feel uncomfortable in silence, when you fear disappointing others. These are triggers. Moments where your old habits take over. And if you don't identify them, they will keep running your life. Now let's talk about why over-explaining is dangerous. It weakens your presence. It makes you seem uncertain. It creates the illusion that your choices are negotiable. Think about it what commands more respect. The person who says, no, I'm not available, or the person who says, no, I can't because I have this thing and I really wanted to, but I just don't think I can make it work. The first person sounds strong. The second sounds unsure. The more you practice silence, the stronger your presence becomes. So here's your action step: refuse to give explanations where they aren't needed. And the next time you catch yourself justifying, pause. Ask yourself, does this explanation serve me? If the answer is no, stop talking. Confidence isn't just about what you refuse to say. And that starts with boundaries. The strongest people in the world don't over-explain because they don't feel the need to. They know their time is valuable. Their energy is limited, and their choices don't need to be defended. So how do you start setting boundaries without over-explaining? Simple. You answer directly. Instead of, I can't do that because I have another thing and I'm really sorry, say I can't. Instead of, I just feel like this isn't right for me, because say, this isn't for me. Your no is a complete sentence. Stop dressing it up with explanations. The moment you stop over-explaining, people start respecting your words more. Look at the most successful people. You never hear them over-explaining. They set boundaries. They speak with clarity. And because of that, people take them seriously. So here's a challenge for you: try replacing every, because with silence. Watch how people react differently. And watch how much more confident you feel. You don't change overnight, you change through repetition. The way to break free from over-explaining isn't just knowing what to do, it's doing it again and again until it becomes second nature. At first it will feel uncomfortable. You'll be tempted to justify yourself. You'll feel the pull to explain. But every time you resist, you build new habits. You rewire your brain, you reinforce confidence. So here's how you make this shift permanent. Start small. Cut out unnecessary explanations in low-stakes situations first. Pause before speaking. Give yourself a second to decide if an explanation is needed. Embrace silence. Stop rushing to fill gaps in conversation. Let people sit with your words. Practice direct answers, no justifications, no fluff, just clarity. The less you explain, the more control you have. The less you seek approval, the stronger you stand. So start now, speak less. Own your presence. And watch how the world responds to the new, more powerful version of you, because real confidence isn't about saying more, it's about needing to say less. How would your life change if you stopped justifying your every move? Think about that for a second. Imagine making a decision, standing by it, and moving forward without explaining, without over-explaining, without feeling the need to prove yourself. The truth is, constantly justifying yourself is exhausting. It creates stress. It fuels self-doubt. It makes you question your own instincts. You start wondering, do I need permission for this? Or what if they don't understand? And before you know it, your life is no longer yours. It's a collection of explanations, a never-ending defense of contingents that shouldn't even matter. The more you explain, the more you feel like you owe an answer. The less you explain, the freer you become. Freedom is the air you breathe when you let go of a need to explain. It's the weight that lifts when you stop trying to make everyone comfortable with your choices. So here's your challenge. When was the last time you made a choice without explaining it? If you can't remember, that means it's time for a change. Because real freedom isn't about making people understand, it's about being at peace with the fact that they don't have to. Have you ever noticed that the people who command the most respect are the ones who don't say much? The reason is simple: power isn't in the explanation. Power is in the action, the choice, the silence. When you stop justifying yourself, something changes. People start listening. They start respecting your words. They start seeing you as someone who doesn't need permission, approval, or validation. Think about it. Who do you respect more? The one who over-explains every decision, or the one who simply decides and moves forward? The world follows those who trust themselves. Leaders, successful people, and those who make an impact don't waste time explaining their every move. They don't ask for approval, they act. And because they act, people believe in them. The moment you stop justifying, people start paying attention. So here's a challenge for you. Stop explaining for one full day. Just make decisions, speak with confidence, act without apology. Watch how differently people treat you. Because when you own your choices without explanation, you step into a level of respect that words alone can't buy. This shift isn't just about confidence, it changes everything. The moment you stop explaining yourself, your mind becomes clearer. You stop second guessing every move. You stop wasting time defending things that don't need defending. And most importantly, you start trusting yourself. But it doesn't stop there. This change affects how people see you. When you stand firm in your decisions, people respect your time, your choices, and your boundaries. Your personal relationships improve because you're no longer trying to please everyone. Your work life changes because you no longer ask for approval, you own your expertise. Every time you explain yourself less, you build another layer of unshakable confidence. So ask yourself, what would your relationships look like if you owned your choices without explanation? How much mental energy would you save? How much stronger would you feel? Try it. The shift is instant. The power is real. And the confidence you'll gain, that will last a lifetime. At the end of the day, confidence isn't about being loud. It's about being certain. True freedom is the ability to exist without needing permission, to make decisions without explaining, to stand by your choices without apology. And here's the truth, you are allowed to exist as you are. You don't need to explain your choices to anyone. You don't need to defend your boundaries. You don't need to make people comfortable with who you are. So here's the final challenge, go one full day making decisions without justification. Say yes or no without a follow-up. Trust yourself enough to speak with clarity and conviction. Watch how people respond differently. Watch how your own confidence shifts. Because freedom isn't found in explanation. It's found in trusting yourself. And once you experience that freedom, you'll never go back. Step into your power. Don't explain, just be. You spend too much time justifying yourself. Too much time making sure everyone else understands your decisions before you fully trust them yourself. That ends today. Because here's what happens when you stop explaining, you gain control. You become someone who moves with confidence. You stop waiting for approval. You stop shrinking. You stop doubting. The less you justify, the stronger you stand. The stronger you stand, the more the world listens. You don't need to explain, you don't need approval. You need your own power. So here's the final question, what would change if you trusted yourself completely? If you made decisions based on your own voice, not the opinions of others. Because once you step into this mindset, you will never look back. Are you ready to stop shrinking yourself for others? Because that's what explaining yourself really does, it makes you smaller. It takes your confidence and puts it in the hands of people who were never meant to hold it. It forces you to seek approval when you were born to lead. And the cost of playing small, it's too high. It steals your time. It drains your energy. It's you stuck in a cycle of second guessing when you should be moving forward. Stop waiting for permission. Stop asking for approval. You're already enough. You are a force, not a negotiator. Stand tall, stay strong, and let your silence speak. So ask yourself, who would you be if you stopped explaining and just owned your presence? Because that version of you, the one who doesn't explain, doesn't justify, doesn't seek approval, that's the real you. It's time to step into it. Confidence isn't a feeling, it's a choice. And today you get to make that choice. Starting now, stop explaining yourself. When someone questions your decision, stand by it. When you feel the urge to justify, resist. When silence feels uncomfortable, own it. The moment you stop explaining, you start commanding respect. So here's the challenge, go 24 hours without unnecessary explanations. Make choices, speak clearly, trust yourself, and watch how differently the world responds. Because confidence isn't in your words. It's in your actions, your presence, your silence. Will you take the first step today? This is your new reality, one where you trust yourself, one where your choices don't need approval, one where you move with confidence, not explanations. From this moment on, let your choices stand on their own. Because your power is not up for debate. It is yours to own, protect, and embody. So walk forward. Speak less, stand tall, and never apologize for owning your life. Because your silence is not weakness, it is your greatest strength. And now it's time to use it.